Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to stop your talking now because we have a unique occasion. Never before have the three men who diverted the rivers of gold been on a platform at the same time. I'm Robert Gottliebsen. I commentate each day with Business Spectator and weekly with Eureka. And by the way, we were started off, Alan Kohler and Steve Bartholomew and myself left our print jobs and went into the net. And like these guys in a way, we got a bit short of cash, but by the time it had come to 2012, Fairfax and News were very different organisations. And I'm going to take you back to 2000. And what a remarkable time it was. For it was in the year 2000 that the rivers of gold were diverted. And I remember it well. I was running BRW and we had the best business website in the country. We're part of Fairfax and we're also into Asia. And the guys came and said, that's no good. You must be dismantled and bashed and all the people involved in it sacked. And that was the very time that the Bassetts at Seek came to Fairfax and said, we're in a bit of trouble. We need, I'm not sure, Andrew, what you said, but it was quite clear that you're a bit short of cash. And I knew them at that time. I knew Irvin Rockman, and Fairfax said, nah, we're going to kill you. And so did everybody else. The arrogance at that time of the executives of that company and of their CEO, Fred Hilmer, has probably not been duplicated in very few places. So Seek was sent to the door and they survived. They didn't go broke. And finally, James Packer comes along and says, you guys have won. I want to buy in. I'm in that business, I'm in the employment business, but we're losing. You've won, I'm buying in. And he made a lot of money out of that decision. And then, of course, realestate.com in 2000, exactly the same time, they were in trouble too. And like Seek, they go along to Fairfax and say, what about it? And like Seek, they were shown the door. No, we're going to murder you because we're Fairfax and we're Sydney and you're going to win. And as you know, Lachlan Murdoch, who hasn't made every decision right, as you know, but in this case, he got it absolutely right. And he came in. And then, of course, we have the car sales. And what do you know? This is a few years later now, but there were discussions with Fairfax, and Fairfax bought into it at one point of time. But no, it went to James Packer. And Kerry gave James a terrible time. He said, those Fairfax guys, they'll kill you because they've already got an equity. But he didn't understand the culture of that company at that time. And they didn't cause any trouble at all. We're going to kill them. And the rest you know. The rivers got diverted. Today, these three companies are capitalised about $9 billion together. Fairfax, about $1 billion. And that's what happened. And in our own profession, the journalistic profession, it was these rivers of gold that funded enormous investments in journalism. They've now been diverted. And both News Corp and Fairfax still have adjustments to do to sort of work that out. But they are very different companies now. The arrogance that you saw in the Hilmer years in 2000 and 2003 has gone. But now, the new owners of the rivers of gold are here before us, and significantly, they're all based in Melbourne. More importantly, they're not based in Sydney. My view is you couldn't do that in Sydney. The Packer and the Murdoch cultures were too great. It had to be done outside that city. And indeed it was. And so with great pleasure, I'm going to invite our three speakers up. They're going to speak for about 6 or 7 minutes, then we're going to have a chat. And I'll start it off and then I'll open it to you too. Our first will be Greg Ellis of Real Estate, then Greg Roebuck of Car Sales, and then Andrew Bassett of Seek. Ladies and gentlemen, give them a hand, and I invite Greg Ellis.
Good afternoon, everyone. Let me just start, by saying that today's theme is how we've disrupted the classifieds market. I should say that at REA, we don't think of ourselves as a classifieds business. Traditional classifieds models are about moving people from a line item to a quarter page, to a full page, or a half page. We certainly offer our customers a range of advertising options, but the future of our business is really maximising the rich data that we have available to us from the benefits of our site. This means building product offerings that fit the purpose for which our company is designed on. Now, I've got some slides later on that we'll talk to you about, but REA, I can honestly assure you, we never sit down and look at our market cap. The reason our staff turn up to work every day is for a purpose, and that purpose is to make the people of Australia and our overseas markets live their property dreams. And it's a really defining part of our organisational culture, because we come to work not to make money and not to deliver a market capitalisation. We come to work to serve the people looking to buy and sell property. And as a result of that, it's a very important part where Robert spoke in his introduction around arrogance, and it's one of the things that we want to deliberately avoid as part of our organisation. We've evolved our business model away from a one-size-fits-all subscription to focus on individual property listings, and that's the property listing is the centre of our market, and it delivers value to our people buying property, people selling property, and those brokers that we service. As a market leader, we know that staying relevant is absolutely critical to our model. And the advertising options that we have on the back of our rich data is actually the essence of our company. Our core competency is the collection, interpretation, and management of information. We just happen to make our money through an advertising model. For example, instead of seeing a listing as an end product, we see it as an opportunity to give property owners insights into the dynamics of the market, to see how their ad is performing relative to similar properties on the market. This means they can gauge whether or not to adjust the market offering of their listing with their agents. We also have valuable data for buyers too, as they can see the people looking for property. So for example, if you're looking for a property for $1 million in Sydney, you can see the number of listings that have been on the market for 12 months, you can see the level of inquiry, you can see the price point. So if there's lots of stock on the market, there's not much inquiry and the price is below the historical volumes, you should be very interested in that market. Managing a high growth business, however, in a competitive environment means we're always looking to evolve our operational performance. Now, I've got some slides, if you can see them here. In our model, there are 3 historical models for running a company. One is called the profit and loss structure, which many of you will be familiar with. One is a functional structure, which most businesses are built on today, IT, sales, and product. And God help you if you work in this structure, which is called the matrix structure. In my opinion, this structure was designed to destroy the human soul and any form of innovation that went with it. So 2 years ago, we made a call to evolve our business. We started our business as a functional business, but we wanted to maintain the disruptive qualities that had made our business successful in the first place. So we created 6 customer-focused or market-focused lines of business to increase our alignment to the market for what those consumers, property owners and customers needed, and to ensure that our organisation remained nimble with no more than 100 people or so involved in those businesses. So what we've actually done is we've established a management structure that sits on top of the lines of business, and those lines of business really focus on delivering to those 3 constituencies that make up our market, which are consumers looking for property, property owners and the agents. Most importantly, we try and create a collaborative environment that allows the diverse thinkers in our organisation with a common goal of satisfying those 3 constituents to develop product and services that meet their needs. And we have a workforce of people that want to come to work every day to do their best against the purpose that we've established. Now, this brings me to a final comment that I'd like to make about the challenges that Australia faces. And one of those is that our economy is actually about to go through a structural revolution. You're starting to see the impacts of the internet on retail, for example, as one sector. In our sector alone, the full value of the real estate sector in GDP terms for the Australian economy is about 10% of GDP. Now, at the mining boom at its peak, it represented 8% of GDP. Now, within Australia at the moment, we've got a significant shortage of skills to transition our economy into a digital relevant economy. And when I talk about skills, I'm not talking about programmers and coders. I'm talking about a management mentality that can take P&L structures and functional structures and matrix structures, which quite frankly are no longer relevant to the way in which our economy will evolve, and turn your organisation into something that manifests the design that you've seen on the table, on the charts there. So when I talk about a shortage of skills, I mean a management competency and an attitude which devolves the decision making to people that are truly competent to make the decision, which generally is not people like me. And that's a very we've got a very historical view of management in this country, where it's a command and control structure, and we don't devolve the decision making and autonomy and responsibility to those individuals and set themselves up in an organisation that can actually make a difference that's purpose-driven, where individuals are completely satisfied with why they come to work, and why they come to work is not about money. Why they come to work is to do a really good job that makes a difference for our economy and gives a sustainable advantage. So for us to be having conversations, for example, about whether we should have an NBN and a non-NBN, quite frankly, is quite silly. If anybody said, do you need a fast digital infrastructure for your economy for the 21st century, the answer surely would have to be yes. But most critically, the conversation needs to be had both in organisations and at the political level, that the competency of Australia should be about how do we actually teach our managers to manage in a digital economy. So I'll leave you with this thought. The most valuable resource that you actually have in your organisation are educated people about 30 years of age. And Australia's ability to respond to the digital age is that we need to be best in class worldwide at transitioning the skills of our workforce, retraining our people, which is a managerial approach and a skills approach to servicing the digital economy. So at REA, to use the expression, we've eaten our own dog food. We're not a classifieds business. We're an advertising business. We run our business on an advertising model, but our core competency is the collection, management and interpretation of data. And the other core competency is how we think about managing our people on a purpose-driven organisation that actually makes a difference for where they're motivated by making a difference in the economy. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like now to invite Greg Roebuck of Carsales to come. Just while he's going up, you've made a lot of money not trying to make money. In fact, the real estate business has been one of the most successful investments in our country and ranks high in the world. Ladies and gentlemen, Greg Roebuck from Carsales.
Thank you, Robert. Well done, Greg. I don't have any slides, but I will just talk a little bit about where the business came from, some of the things that I look back over the years and say these have been good decisions, and a little bit about where we're going as a business. I'd love to stand here and say back in 1996, 97, I had a vision of the business looking exactly like it does today. That was absolutely not the case. I think it was really, this is just a better way to do something that people have been doing for 100 years. And we've got an opportunity to do some things that you just can't do in other mediums. And I don't know how many people look back when they first bought a car or inquired on a car. For me, it was a very daunting experience to have to contact a dealer, find it in the newspaper first, contact the dealer. You know, they'd tell you all about the car and you'd have to go in and look at it. You know, it is a daunting thing. It's the second most expensive purchase people make in their lives. And making it easier for consumers has always been very core to what we do. And I think one of the big differences between us, perhaps, and some of the traditional media has been that we weren't biased by 100 years of history. We didn't think about what is the process to advertise a car. We thought about what is the process to sell a car. And I think that's been very good, but I'll touch on that shortly. There's been a bit of press around particularly Fairfax and the challenges and some of the things that particularly these businesses have changed. The things for me that we always brought to the table, and Robert touched on it earlier, that they believed they were unassailable. As the Carsales business, we have a very healthy dose of paranoia. And I think, you know, whether that paranoia was running out of money in the early days, and we came very close to running out of money in the early days, or whether that paranoia is people doing to us what you know, some would say we've done to traditional print classifieds. I think it's a good thing for a business. I think you can never relax and believe that you've got the answer to all the problems. You can't believe that you know all the things that people are looking for. You just need to continue to innovate. And as a business and as a culture, if you said, hopefully to most people in the business, you know, what are we really good at? I would have said it's innovation, or that they would say it's innovation. We have to be innovative. The world's changing at a rapid rate. There's just so many things that continue to change. Anyway, I'll cover a couple of things as a business. We employ a bit over 400 people. 330 of them are located here in Melbourne. We have offices of different purposes in different countries. We have New Zealand, Malaysia, Thailand and China for predominantly a services-based business. We've recently made investments in Asia in a classifieds business very similar to the Carsales business operating in Malaysia, Thailand and Indonesia. And more recently we've invested in a business in Brazil. Brazil, not many people realise, is the fourth largest car market in the world. And I think all of these businesses are certainly capable of being world-class businesses. Both SEEK and REA, I think, are further down that path than Carsales, but it's fantastic as a country and certainly as a state of Victoria that all of these businesses grew out of Melbourne and are taking on world opportunities. So I think I feel very proud to be in that company. We don't just do cars. We've got a different philosophy, I think, than some of the other verticals or some of the other classified businesses, advertising businesses in REA's case. But we operate cars, bikes, boats, trucks, caravans, earth movers, excavators, construction equipment. And we do that because there is a lot of value in getting access to that audience for each of those categories. We weren't allowed to advertise in the newspapers. We tried, and our ads were rejected. We needed to build our own audience, and growing all those verticals has been very good for us. I said when I started about the fact that we took a different approach because we didn't have a history of doing things the way they'd always been done. And one of my favourite ad campaigns, we didn't run it for that long because sometimes maybe it was a bit too obtuse, but we used to run billboards that said, "Stop advertising, start selling." And for the people at Car Sales, it was very intuitive. We knew exactly what we meant. People don't advertise to advertise. They advertise to sell. And all the things we do as a business is oriented around that perspective. We're a little bit different than real estate and employment. All the people that we work with own the thing they're selling. So car dealers own their stock, private sellers own their cars, and we're much, in some respects, closer to the requirement of getting a result. So all the things that we did along the way have been about getting that result, getting that sale for the customer. And it's great. You know, we've got all these hundreds of people that go through the same process themselves of buying and selling cars and coming back to that innovative culture. You know, a lot of the great ideas, a lot of the really cool things that I love about the business and what we do have come from people in the business who said, you know, wouldn't it be great that when I sell my car, you give me a little list of all the things I've got to remember, like, you know, cancelling my insurance, cancelling my e-tag, you know, just little things. And as a business, I wouldn't say that we've got lots and lots of 100% changes that we've done over the years. I think we've got hundreds and hundreds of 1% changes we've done over the years, and we don't sit there and say, well, what are we going to do, you know, to combat what's happening in other parts of the world, what other competitors are doing. We need a big thing to achieve our results. We think a lot about, well, what about lots of little things, because they add up very quickly. Culture drives that. I'm very proud of the people in the business. We tend to talk about employing car sales type people rather than people with just particular skill sets. They've got to fit our culture. They've got to be a little bit paranoid about what others are going to do. And truly, as you know, a business, we need to be thinking about who is going to come and do to us as we've done to others. And it most likely will be a world-class business. It'll be a Google, it'll be a Facebook, it'll be an eBay. It won't most likely be someone that's trying to be a Me Too as a car sales business. I think we think very much about, well, we've got to be world-class. We've got to be better than Google when it comes to cars. We've got to know more about cars than Wikipedia. We've got to know, you know, what is the social process of buying and selling a car, and how does that relate to our business? I think, you know, we go back a few years. I wonder if this mobile thing will take off. I look around the room. I suspect there isn't anyone in the room that doesn't have a smartphone, that doesn't use it when they're sitting in airports or on trains or doing different things. It's the way people are now using the internet. I saw a guy called Steve Wozniak talk, who was the co-founder of Apple, and he said one of the mistakes that Nokia made was they surveyed their customers and said, would you like a phone that has internet capability? And their view was, and the feedback was, no, we want a phone that's a phone. Apple's approach was, would you like the internet in your pocket? And by the way, we could probably have a phone with it as well. And you know, the rest is history. They changed the world with the ability to have an internet capability in your pocket. For car sales, if you include people who access our desktop site using their iPad, nearly 50% of our traffic today comes from mobile, and that's only going to continue. I wouldn't want to be standing here saying, look, we're a really, really good business as a desktop site. But those other guys are good at mobile. We have to be good at all those things. Will Windows 8 be successful? Will big screen? Will PlayStation 4? Xbox 360? We need to be in all those things. But as a business, I feel very comfortable that we've got that innovative culture, and whatever comes our way, we're going to be able to respond to. Thank you.
Now I'm going to call on Andrew Bassett. But did you notice the similarity between the property presentation and the car sales presentation? They both aim for a very similar culture, and a culture very different to what we're used to in very large organisations, including newspapers and television stations. Andrew.
Thank
Thanks, Robert. It was good to hear the Greg story actually for the first time, and I can vouch for the fact that they're two great businesses because they sort of screwed up the implementation of our original business plan. We were meant to go first employment, then real estate, I think, and then cars. But we got a bit busy in employment, and by the time we got to cars and real estate, these guys were absolutely nailing it, so there was no point. So it's a shame, really, because they're quite good markets. Now, I meant to cover apparently 15 years of SEEK and how we got to where we are today, as well as covering talking about the future of the Australian digital economy, all in 6 minutes, with Robert here to give the wind-up signals. So I may need to leave a little bit of stuff out, as the two Gregs did. But I'll try to cover briefly, firstly, a little bit about how we got started, because I do think it's relevant to where we are today, where all of us are today. Talk about some of the key beliefs and principles that continue to drive us. A little bit about where we are and the opportunities and challenges facing us. And finally, just a few brief thoughts about the Australian digital economy. In terms of how we started rather, I do think it explains a little bit about where all three of us are, because, you know, the basic story is simple enough. With my brother looking for a house, finding the process frustrating. He and I spent 6 months doing a business plan before deciding to have a crack, and then Irvin and Matt Rockman invested, and Matt became a partner. But the questions we asked ourselves, I think, are relevant around, some were easy, some were hard. You know, the easy questions were around whether classifieds would move online, and that was obvious to us that they would, because just the functionality and cost advantages were just too great for that not to happen. And it was also pretty clear there'd be a nice first prize. We saw no reason why online would be different to print, and there'd be a really good prize for the winner. Not much of a second prize, but a really good prize for the winner if you could be successful. And which brought us to the much harder questions of whether we could be the successful player online. There were really about 100 online employment sites, including the newspapers, including global players like Monster. So that was obviously the most important question for us. We saw the print guys as the key competition. And we actually thought that a pure player could be successful against print. And the logic that drove that was around us putting ourselves in the shoes of the print guys and trying to work out what strategies we would adopt to deal with the threat of the internet to their very profitable revenue streams coming from classifieds. And the answer was we couldn't see any easy answers, any obvious things for them to do. We were going to be turning up to work every day, trying to think about how we could use the medium to make life better for job seekers, make life better for advertisers. They were going to be turning up to work every day, trying to figure out how to stop the medium hurting their revenue streams. So it's not a surprise to us that what's ended up happening is that pure players have won each of the classifieds category streams, not only in Australia, but also internationally for the most part. So that was kind of us versus the newspapers. We did think a pure player could be a chance. In terms of why us rather than why one of the other pure players out there, our answer was probably a bit more rubbery, and we probably answered it more in the why not us, and thought we'd have a crack. And in terms of coming to that question, we really came without any digital experience or expertise at all. I'd actually never used the internet when I started doing the business plan, and for quite a while I felt a bit of a fraud, like I just didn't know what I was doing on the internet. What I reasonably quickly worked out is no one else knew what they were doing either, so it was a level playing field. I'll discuss now some of the key principles and beliefs that we've always had and that have held us in good stead. In saying this, I don't want to pretend that we didn't make mistakes. We made plenty, and indeed it would probably be a more entertaining and amusing speech if I went through some of the mistakes that we made. But I think you'd find yourself even more perplexed about how we find ourselves in a position of strength. So the topic demands that I focus on the things that we got right. There were probably 4 key principles and beliefs. The first was the importance of people. The second around the need to focus on the fundamentals of the business unwaveringly. The second was a willingness to third was a willingness to take calculated risks. And finally, the need to maintain a healthy paranoia and to be constantly improving and evolving. In terms of the people, everyone mentions this, but it's particularly true of digital businesses. When we started, there were 8 or 9 people and $1.5 million against much bigger organisations, much better funded. So if our people weren't more passionate, more talented and better than the competitors, we weren't going to have a business. What we mean by better, it's kind of hard to talk to briefly, but I kind of know it when I see it, but it's hard to talk to. It's about really passion for driving great outcomes. It's around having great values. It's around having great judgment. They're the people that we really need. And even though we're a bit bigger with a bit more money than we used to be, getting the right people on board remains critical to our success. The second is the need to focus unwaveringly on the fundamentals of the business. And there's a few aspects to this. Firstly, it's about really focusing on what drives success in the business and not wasting time or money on anything else. In the early days, that was quite simply just getting job ads to the start, getting job seekers to the start and creating a marketplace. As we became more mature, it became a little bit more sophisticated in terms of just trying to drive great outcomes for our job seekers, great outcomes for our advertisers. But the need to stay focused and not get distracted remained the same. It's also remembering that money is the output of what we do, the output of doing a good job in building the marketplace, in driving great outcomes. It's not the immediate focus. A couple of times we've kind of lost that, and we've started focusing on our bottom line. Each time we've done that, the business went a bit astray before we corrected ourselves. And finally, it's always about making decisions with a medium to long-term view, not getting too caught up in the market's desire for good profits this half or good profits this year, but really focusing on the long-term future of the business. The third heading, or the third principle, is around a willingness to take calculated risks. And this is really critical in the online space because our space is so dynamic that the only certainty is that there is no certainty in anything that we do. It's important to stress, there are a few shareholders here, so when I talk about risk, it's always calculated risk. And really never bet the shop type risk, I guess, with the exception of when we got started. And we've made a number of significant investments in earlier stage markets internationally, in education businesses. And I think we always do so with an eye to saying if one or more of them are failures, we'll still be fine as an organisation. They won't cause us substantial grief. And I do think a willingness to take risk is absolutely obvious and critical for companies in our space, but we don't have a great business environment for that, particularly in the listed environment. Nowadays, the CEO having a single failure on his record hurts his reputation and could cost him his job, which is at odds with the need to take risks to be successful in the online world. And finally, the fourth heading is the need to remain healthy, to maintain a healthy paranoia and be constantly evolving and improving. And there's not a lot of room for hubris in our industry. The history of technology companies is that no one tends to survive for very long or thrive for very long in the marketplace. And if you're not constantly evolving and improving, you're either slowly or you're quickly dying. And our paranoia, despite doing pretty well against the print guys, has received some validation, unfortunately, with a new wave of competitors coming from overseas, like LinkedIn, like Indeed. And there's obviously specific strategies we've adopted in relation to these specific threats, including aggressive investment in product and technology, and some of the things around data that Greg talked to. And we think we can beat these guys. But the general response for us against competitors generally is for us to always be striving towards absolute perfection in the offering that we provide. We want every single job seeker in the country to say they found their job through Seek, every employer to say they filled their last position through Seek, and then we leave no room for competitors to attack us. We'll never achieve that perfection, of course, but it's the striving to do so that hopefully will keep us in front of our competitors. Just very briefly in terms of where we are today, the opportunities and the challenges. We've now become quite a geographically diverse business, and we have operations throughout China, Southeast Asia, Brazil, Mexico, and more recently Africa, and have over now 7,000 mostly happy staff in businesses we control. Our reason for being is quite simply to make a positive change in people's lives by helping them with their careers. We're proud of the number of people we help. Approximately 275 million people visit one of our websites every month and see about 1 million jobs. And in education, we have over 50,000 students enrolled each year and 20,000 students that we educate. But what makes our business manageable despite the added complexity is that we attempt to stay focused on the ambitions we push forward for. In our employment business, our challenge globally is to ensure, as I said before, that we're responsible and we assist as many placements as possible. We expect our international operations to represent a growing proportion of our total business. And what we're trying to do here is simply instill the beliefs and principles I talked to before, push them to invest in great people, focus on the fundamentals and so on. Just very briefly on the future of Australian digital, I won't pretend to be an expert, and I expect I'm close to Robert's wind-up signal. I see some causes for optimism and some for pessimism. The optimism comes from the fact that I do see a lot of people with great ideas and great energy pushing in the digital space. The pessimism is there are a lot of the dollars that are flowing from physical businesses to online businesses now aren't going to the pockets of Australian businesses, but to overseas competitors like the Googles, like the Amazons, like the Facebooks and so on. So I think the Australian entrepreneurs and the Australian businesses really need to lift their sights. We need to maintain a starting point that if we're not best in the world at what we do, we're vulnerable even in Australia. And if we are best in the world at what we do, we need to start looking to take that overseas in order for the business to be successful. That's all. Thank you very much.
Greg, you were saying that there's a shortage of skills in Australian managers to adapt to the digital world. Do you think, first of all, that applies to our media companies?
I think it actually happens across the economy, Robert. So by definition, the answer to your question is yes. So one of the things that we've consistently struggled with at REA is that we bring people in and we effectively have to deprogram them from the historical techniques that they've been used to manage people. I think to take some of Paul's comments around the orientation for risk, the preparedness to push responsibility and accountability to a group of people below you where the expertise is set up. If I think back in my career, I'm 51, so I've been working for 26 years. I've only ever enjoyed 2 companies I've ever worked in because I didn't really attach to the purpose of the company, and you weren't treated with the respect and the skill, they didn't respect the skills that you had. So I think from a managerial point of view, we spend a lot of time and effort respecting the employees, establishing the purpose of the organisation, which is a value-based principle, and that's very foreign to management.
So it's great, given that a large number of the people here are involved in the media industry, it's going to be very difficult for our newspaper organisations and our television stations and our advertising agencies to in fact adapt to this new world, even now when it's been there a long time.
Oh, I agree, and that's why from an economy point of view, Paul made the comment, and so did Greg, about the competitiveness of where we're at. On a bigger scale, Australia needs a damn good wake-up call. We've got some material competitors coming who could take significant percentages of jobs and GDP away from via a digital offering.
Greg, do you reckon you're the best in the car business, in your business? Do you have a real lead globally or not?
Look, I would say at any point in time we feel that we're ahead of the curve, but there's a lot of people chasing hard, and we can't ever stop and say, yep, we're there now, we're so far in front, we don't have to continue to evolve. And mobile is just a classic example of that, where if you believed that mobile wasn't going to be the impact that it has been, by the time you realised it would be too late. Apple versus Nokia is the analogy. But in terms of where we are versus the rest of the world, I think we have a lot of value to add. I think both the other businesses as well. We are world class from the perspective of our marketplace here in Australia is very competitive. We have more car companies competing for sales in Australia than they exist in America, with a hugely different population. So we have to be good at what we do, and we believe we are good at what we do, but someone's going to take it away from us unless we
do. You want to dominate the world in due course?
Look, if it's available, that's fine, yes.
What about you, Andrew? Do you see yourself as the global leader in this space?
Look, I think the comments I made before, I think we have to be. So we're not the global leader. We could lose Australia as well as the markets we're in. We're now the markets I mentioned before, across sort of 20% of the world's GDP and fairly large populations. So I think really we aspire to be the best at what we do. And then if we can do that, we should be the biggest at what we do and be able to roll that out to the other markets we're in.
What about you, Greg, in property? Do you want to go globally, or is that not your bag?
We'd like to be in more countries. I have a different view in the sense that we don't want to dominate. I think if we're in a position to allow the people participating in the property process, the buyers and the sellers particularly, to be completely empowered and in control of what is a major transaction, then by definition we'll do well. But our job is to use the internet to let them feel informed, in control, and make a really effective and efficient decision. And that's what we're about. And we'd like to do that in more countries. As I said, a domination thing doesn't really enter the terminology. We're a commercial business, but it's based on a value proposition.
Okay, I want each of you to look forward 2 or 3 years, and I want you to look at what change you expect in your neck of the woods, and what are the greatest threats that you're going to have to adapt, and just as part of that, are you worried about being another Fairfax? You're nearest. Andrew, you go first.
You know, you're exactly right. I think again to my comments, I think if you look at the history of technology companies, relatively brief, so many times you've had a company becoming extremely powerful, whether it be IBM, whether it be Microsoft, whether it be a range of other companies. Netscape, for example, almost disappeared. Yahoo, nowhere near the power it used to be. And they don't last long. They're heroes for 5 minutes, and then somebody else comes along and has a better way of doing things or something similar. So I think the starting point we all need to carry with us as technology businesses, that if we're not moving forward, if we're not being the next wave, somebody else will do it to us, and we will be the Fairfax of the world. So we need to learn the lesson of Fairfax. Was hard for them. We need to learn that lesson. We always need to be taking that attitude that if we're not moving forward, we're dying.
Is there a different model that you're frightened of, specifically for your business?
The answer is we want to admit the different model that we're frightened of, and then we don't need to be frightened of it.
But you're seeing it out there. Someone else has got it.
I'm not going to tell you if there was one, but I'm not that silly.
Right, Greg. What about you? Do you see different things coming at you?
Yeah, we do. The thing, we know where we think, well, sorry, that's a bit of a silly statement. We're pretty sure that our biggest competitive threat will come from a person who can make the entire property process simple, efficient. So the mortgaging, the selection, the buying and the selling.
One-stop shop.
One-stop shop.
No banks.
So, well, no, not so much no banks. You still need the money, but a different mechanism by which you do it. So the good thing is we know what it is.
You've cut out real estate agents then?
No, definitely not. I have a firm belief that people will always need a broker because you need an unbiased. So we've got, so to answer your questions, it's the biggest competitive threat is someone making that process simple, efficient, and our job is to do that. So we know where the competitive threat's very likely to be, and we're responding to that immediately. Our biggest issue is the retention and maintenance of our people. And there's a number in the room here today. I don't know who's left at REA. If I look around the room, there's a lot of them here, but they're very good people.
Ask for Rise, by the way.
And the third thing is I agree with the comments that have been made. You've just got to have the managerial courage to continue to evolve your model. And it's not through technology, but we've moved our business from a subscriptions business to a listing business. That was a courageous decision, which was the right decision to do. But the managerial courage to continue to evolve your businesses, if you don't do that, you're dead.
Greg?
Yeah, look, I don't, well, I hope we'll never be Fairfax. You know, the big end of town had a view that they were unassailable, and that's certainly not inbuilt in our culture. I think that the other thing they weren't prepared to do was to cannibalise themselves. And you know, we've got another business called Quick Sales where you can sell anything free, including cars, bikes, boats, trucks, all the things I talked about as having specific verticals performing those services. So we're happy to cannibalise ourselves, because if we don't, someone else might. And I think that's, again, it's culture, it's the ability to say that we're not unassailable, we're not the big end of town, and we need to, you know, keep focused on, you know, who's coming around the corner and be there first.
Okay, it's open to you for questions. We've got a microphone there, we've got one there. Put your hand up and we'll... And if you don't put your hand up, I'll start talking again. Here we are, there's one here.
All three of you speak of the importance of the
Could you
people.
excuse me, could you say your name first?
Barry Novi. I am an estate agent. All three of you speak of the importance of people in your business, which is, in this, to me, interestingly, it's a very much a core factor in your discussion. As businesses mature, how do you bring those people with you, or how do you decide in a way people don't stay 30 years old and at the height of their competence, so to speak, at that point in time, and it becomes one of those transitional things? How do you keep your people alive and still part of your business, or do you find that you have to find new people to replace their roles?
Okay, the question is, just so you all can hear it, that, the importance of people and how you handle the maturity of people. Do you have to bring new people in as changes take place? Who'd like to try that one first? Okay, Greg?
If you like, it's a good question. A simple answer to a good question is that we follow a mantra in the company, which is company, team, individual. So we follow our decision-making process that way. We recruit against that particular profile. We're very interested in high competency, high self-esteem, low ego. And so we recruit and drive our people against that, and people that don't ultimately fit that desire go, and we bring new people in. But it's company, team, individual, high competency, high self-esteem, low ego. That's the simple metrics that we use.
But Gottliebsen is there and he's doing all right for a while, and suddenly the thing changes. And he's no longer able to cope with that and adapt to this new situation. Do you just simply say it's time to go?
Well,
Yes?
what we do, well, you're given a choice, but certainly we'd like people to see.
And what are the choices?
Well, the choice is that an open mindset is required.
Yep.
And generally, you're right that some people move from an open mindset to a closed mindset, and the day you move that is the day you need to go.
Yeah, look, I don't think it's an age thing. I think it's an attitude thing, and it's embarrassing. I've been in the automotive industry for 30 years, and I employ a whole lot of people that weren't even born when I started there. And do I feel like I'm any less able to look at the things that the business faces today than 30 years ago? Well, you know, potentially I've forgotten a lot of stuff, but I enjoy the challenge, and I think people that enjoy the challenge are, it's less age-related and more attitude-related. But it's good to have people with new ideas, and I think if we're a business that wasn't growing and wasn't bringing in new ideas, you know, we believe that we had all the answers to the old problems, none of the new problems. So I like bringing new people in. We do an induction process at work, and regularly there's more people in that than were in the business, 15 or 10 years ago, just as new staff. So new ideas, age, less important, great attitude wins every time.
You right with that?
Look, very similar, some of it's just the values, getting people, we've got specific behaviours that we want people to demonstrate, and really employing people to go to those values. And there's definitely an element of flexibility, as the guys mentioned. It is fast moving. So some people that are successful in other organisations struggle at sea because of that nature.
Okay.
Is that work? Yeah.
Your name?
I'm Peter Charles from Channel 7. Traditional media, as some people like to say. We don't like to think that. But all three of you said that you took a lot of risks at the start of starting up your business, and you made some mistakes, but you obviously made some really good decisions. When did you start to realise that, hey, we're onto something and it's going to work? And did you stop and celebrate that, or was it just foot to the floor and keep going?
Look, I'll take it first. I think as a business, we probably, one of the challenges we face is stopping and celebrating success. I'm constantly of the opinion that that was yesterday and we've got to worry about tomorrow, and I sometimes look back and forget to thank the great people in the business for the great things that they bring every day. So I think that is a challenge that we do continue, just to look at what we need to do in terms of making tough decisions, and were they right. My background was technology. I was never really a sales-focused person, but I love the fact that I can look every one of my customers in the eye and say I'm a good value proposition. And I think if I can sell them what I'm doing as a business, we should feel good about those decisions. I don't want to be trying to sell someone something I don't believe in, or that I don't think is adding value to their business. And that's been very important in identifying what's working, what's not working.
So, Greg, what did you do when you felt that you had the business is succeeding and you're getting there? What happened?
Sorry, you were saying...
This is the question. Yes.
I thought your question was, how do you know when there's success? Was that your
Okay.
question? Well, look, the reality is that for us, we're very focused on not over-specifying the product too early. And one of the wonderful things about the internet is that you get feedback per second about whether it's good or bad. So we generally come with a logic that says what problem are we trying to solve, what do we think is the best way to solve it, not overcommit too early to the product design, put it out there and see what the reaction is. And then if a modification's required, then make the modification. So it's very hard. I think one of the guys, I just forget which one, was talking about the Nokia story. You know, the way to avoid that misinterpretation of the question or not asking the question the right way is to just keep your sense about what problem are you trying to solve, put it out there. The market will soon tell you whether it sucks or not.
Andrew?
Look, I think covered, but in terms of success in the early days, I'm simply going to go back a bit, but success for us, I used to get a file in terms of how many applications, we had a few hundred jobs and a few hundred job seekers or whatever it was. I'd get a file that told me how many applications we got. And one day it'd be 1, then it'd be 2, then it'd be back to 0, then it'd be 4. So success was when we hit 10. But really, it was that was relative success. But in terms of success, you kind of know when it's working. You kind of know when you get momentum. You kind of know when you've got the wind behind your back. And until then, you've got to work damn hard to get to that point. And then it gets a lot easier. Obviously, once you start hitting critical mass with any part of our business, things get a lot easier.
Robert Petty Yates. Thank you for the presentation. It's wonderful. For those of us who were involved at the time when this was put together, it's almost a miracle 10 years on to see what you managed to destroy. Congratulations. My question is really about your opening comment, Robert, which is what's in the water here in Melbourne?
Say it again, Peter?
What is in the water here in Melbourne? Because in 1985, the investment banking industry kicked off. It all went to Sydney. In sort of 1995, we had the mobile phone industry. You know, we moved from bricks to others. And that was a little bit split between Sydney and Melbourne because we had, you know, Vodafone was actually originally out of Melbourne. But come the internet, we all expected it to be a Sydney thing because it seemed to be around media. And then suddenly it shifted to classifieds. And then we've had the funds management industry, which has also come here. And so there's something as seems to have occurred in the water in Melbourne. Can you tell us what was helpful about the environment and what's in the water in Melbourne? And if I could have one final question, how did your boards help you or not help you? Because my concern is Australian boards are a big detractor on risk-taking, entrepreneurship and growth. And I'd like you to give the message to board members as to how they need to change that. Thank you.
Greg Roebuck can answer the last one.
Andrew, you answer the first one. The question is, why did Melbourne succeed in this? What's in the water and the situation that enabled your business to succeed when you would otherwise have thought it would have come out of Sydney?
It's pretty obvious. I would have thought Peter, in terms of people in Melbourne are much smarter, much more entrepreneurial, much better looking. Look, you know, there's an element of, you know, it's a small thing, but there's an element of you do take some solace from people around you. You know, my brother had the idea. He was at the time working as a lawyer for Evan Thornley, who was Melbourne-based. We had conversations with the Gregs and some of the other people, and there's no doubt that a bit of support network grows up. Some investors had success, early success with businesses like LookSmart, and were therefore encouraged to invest in businesses like Seek and some of the other businesses. I think there's a little bit in that, but I think a little bit just frankly coincidence.
I think
That's bad luck, isn't it? Eh?
I don't know, Peter. I think it's probably two things. I think you sort of Sydney's corporate head office, and Melbourne's historically sort of not the corporate head office of Australia. So these things foster outsider head office mentality. And I think probably, and I don't know whether this is true or not, but I perceive that the wealth is a bit more evenly distributed in Melbourne, and that people are prepared to fund this. You can get access to funds, I suspect, from some net worth individuals probably easier than the consolidation of money that sits in Sydney. That's a subjective comment, the first one, but I think outside a head office environment is certainly one of the things that goes on. Bit sort of the, you know, Melbourne's a bit foodie music too relative to the others, so it's a bit of an eclectic culture here. That could be a third variable.
Might I add to that, by the way, I think that simple situation is that it gets back to your earlier remark that existing Australian managers are having an enormous problem adapting to this situation. And so if you have all the media companies in Sydney, they can't adapt.
Yeah.
And therefore you can go, it doesn't have to be Melbourne, unfortunately. It could be the Brisbane Water, even might be the Adelaide Water, but it happened to be the Melbourne Water. But the fact is that our major newspaper and television companies are having the most incredible difficulty in adapting to this situation. And that difficulty will increase, if anything. And that's where the startups tend to be in a different place. If I might now go to your boards, because every half year you have to go and put your reports forward. Boards are notoriously risk averse, and yet you have to be risk averse. Are your boards a problem, or are they a problem all around the place?
Look, I think... Next.
Cameras.
Cameras great. Thanks. Look, Carsales has had an interesting evolution of its board. You know, we started with 3 technology people and 3 car dealers on our board, and you know, it was very interesting. We used to talk about how many Ford dealers we'd signed up that month. We then had a significant change. We had James Packer, we had John Alexander join our board, and they weren't there for a terribly long time, but I think looking back, they helped us grow up as a business and added value in terms of what we needed to be thinking about as a business, trying to grow substantially. And today I would say our board adds enormous value. And from my point of view as a CEO, I get a lot of support. And the risk element's there, but I think the trust element's there as well. And you know, none of the businesses are overnight businesses with, you know, a 3-year track record. We're all, you know, 15, 16, 17 years old. So I think that trust helps. But you need a good board. A board needs to, you know, have some ability to look at the challenges, you know, away from the management day to day.
Andrew, did James Packer have a big role on your board?
Yeah, no, he was great. James was really good because he invested relatively, not so early. I mean, the business was well established. We were number one and we felt we were going to win. But James was just great. He was very supportive. He was very helpful. He's very, very smart. And so from the first meeting, which is chronicled in a book that came out a couple of days, he was very much, you guys are going to win, I want to work with you. Every other conversation we'd have with the big guy was, you know, we can kill you or we can work with you, you choose type thing. But he really got where the space was headed. And so, no, he was very good, very supportive without interfering, so he was great.
And what about your board? Do you find difficulties as you want to do new things?
No, I think just visibility. So Peter's question is, I completely agree, a good and supportive board is critical, and that comes down to both diversity, both in terms of experience and gender. So they've got to mirror the markets that you're in. So for example, you know, we'd like to own more businesses in Asia, so board members that have experience in Asia is what I mean by mirroring the market. So a good board is critical, so mirroring the markets you work is critical. An understanding of the business is also critical, and a preparedness to back the management team based on the fact that you've got a proven track record, and if you do that, they're supportive. So if you can get those 3 ingredients, I think you've got a good board, but having that is critical.
Mark.
Yeah, Mark Baker again, in my day job, of course, a long-time Fairfax tragic. And last time I looked, it wasn't only Fairfax that was bleeding from the challenges of the new era. Clearly, one of the big implications of the diversion of the rivers of gold has been how do we fund good journalism into the future and the important role that journalism plays for our democracy and our society. That's not your problem, I know. However, as clever guys in the internet world, what would your advice be to traditional media to respond to this challenge, and how can they reinvent themselves? And indeed, what's your take on the big steps that all of the major players have already taken to try and reinvent themselves in this space without the rivers?
Your advice to the current media players. Who wants to go first? Go on, Andrew, you're there.
Thanks, guys. Look.
You got the biggest mic.
Thank you. Now I've lost my own train of thought. Thank you for that again. Look, by the way, I should take no joy in that, because there's absolutely no doubt the fact that we've separated classifieds from the rest of the newspaper has made it very, very hard to fund journalism, and that journalism plays a very, very important role in society, so I take no joy at that outcome at all. Didn't stop me, but I take no joy in it. Look, the second piece is hard. I think it is important. You know, I'm hopeful that enough people recognise the importance. There's enough people now some of whom have money and that can make a difference, now recognise that it does play a critical role in society. We're possibly going below a low watermark in terms of just a seriously functioning journalistic community that allows us to place politicians under scrutiny, businesses under scrutiny, and everything else that journalists do, that I'm hoping we'll find a way to fund it, whether that is through the subscription model that some of the newspapers are trying, or just benevolent people with a bit of money that try to do the same thing. I'm hoping somebody saves it, because it is a problem.
Do you think you'll consider it in due course?
I'm not going to make a commitment here in front of 300 people, but maybe.
Yeah, I think what is really important in the conversation is it's actually freedom of speech. That's one of the underlying principles of a democracy. And journalism is one aspect of freedom of speech. So the internet itself provides an incredible freedom of speech. But I would like to see good quality journalism continue to stimulate the right sorts of conversations and debates that are in the country. And there's no question that good quality journalism is a very important part of our business, and how that evolves, I'm not exactly sure. What I know about journalism would fit on the back of my thumb, seriously, but freedom of speech is important. Good quality journalism is a clear aspect of that. So I do hope there's a way we find a model that sustains it.
Greg, you read it?
We're a little bit different to SEEK and REA. We actually employ journalists. They write great stories or great in-depth analyses of vehicles as they come out, be they new or used, and boats and bikes are the same. So certainly see the value that they bring to what we do in other parts of the business. But a lot of what we do, there is an analogy with journalism. We needed to provide value to to two parties, consumer wanting to buy and someone wanting to sell. And I think journalism will evolve into where the value is clear and worth paying for. And certainly, I subscribe to a number of journalists or a number of media entities because of the quality of the journalists. And I think there is value, and provided that value can be demonstrated, and it's the challenge all of our businesses face, is demonstrating our value. That future should still be bright. Will it be in print? Will it be online? I suspect it's more online, but if the value's there, the money should follow.
I'd just like to add to that to say that it is in many ways easier to start a new business, as our three enterprises have shown, than to adapt an existing business, because you have the very problem we've talked about. The managers are not, they have great difficulty adapting to the new world of the net. It's much easier to start it afresh and have people absolutely attuned to the situation. I think the good news from journalists' point of view is that I think most of our media companies now understand the problem. They certainly didn't even a few years ago. They do now. But I think it's going to be a hard time. And not like Andrew, I don't welcome it, but because none of our newspaper organisations are making a lot of money, or major ones anyway, and that's always a bit dangerous when there's a lot of employees involved.
Hi, Andrew Wilkinson from Real Estate. Just got a question for, I pretty much know what Greg might say, but be interested in what Andrew and Greg Roebuck might answer to, given that our economy is is going through a structural change, and given the emergence of digital as a key part of creating value and maintaining our prosperity in this country, what do we see as the key challenges for either existing pure players or new startups? What do we have to do collectively to enable that to continue to happen, so to continue to create prosperity? What do you see as the challenges?
Okay, so our question is that given that we're facing structural change and the internet, what are the key challenges that both startups and new players will have to meet? Who'd like to start that off? You've talked.
Yeah, look, we're all fortunate in some respects that when we started our businesses, you know, the internet was still pretty new and the ability to cut through was much easier, I think, than it is today. And you know, building a brand, and as the car sales business, we're trying to grow brands all the time. The quick sales brand's a good example, and it's tough, and you need the support of, you know, sometimes the bigger players to assist. I think the startups have at least got some people they can talk to. I spend quite a lot of time dealing with, you know, people that are starting an online business. There's people they can talk to now, which is a big advantage over where we were. So I think there is, you know, some value in what's occurred over the last 15 years. I think as an economy, though, you know, we need to recognise that we're a great country with great ideas, and let's try and find ways to keep those startups in Australia, because I continually read of an Australian who's, you know, cracked it in Silicon Valley. It's disappointing. I'd love to think of more businesses here, more investment here in the startup culture, and saying, look, here's 3 businesses they started in, you know, in Melbourne, and they're world-class players. You know, how do we engender that and create that as part of the Australian culture rather than allow that to go offshore?
Oh, I think Andrew works. I agree with Greg's. I think from us, it's the money, it's the commitment, the ideas, but also too for those people involved in the digital world, it's to get back in and put something back. I'm involved with a company just as an advisory level, which is non-paid, with a company called Blue Chili, and it does startups, and it's to provide some advice and some guidance about, you know, for those people starting their ideas. So it's money, but when I speak to people around the startup world today, money isn't their problem. It's actually experience and confidence and a judgment to make the right investment at the right time. So I think, Andrew, the answer to your question is really the digital world has got to put back a little bit to foster that and to help those people grow and build businesses, because building them from scratch is really, really hard.
You right there?
I agree with Greg. Greg.
Okay.
Thanks, Robert. Yeah, David Polton from Inter-Ellison. So I'm a lawyer from, therefore, a business which has not been disrupted by the internet, at least not completely, at least not yet. But I was interested, before it was mentioned about the, if you like, the balance in your business between between what you're actually sort of overtly doing, which is providing a service and selling real estate or cars or whatever, as distinct from the value in the business of the data you collect. I wonder if I could get a comment from any of you about what proportion of the, if you like, the importance in the business do you see the data collection as opposed to what the consumer sees you doing, and what sorts of uses you're going to be putting that data to?
I'm happy to start off on that one. I think data, you know, there's some enormous values that we certainly see from the information we collect. I'll give you a couple of little examples. No matter what car any of you drive, we've probably seen 100 of them this month in each market in Australia. So the ability for us to say, well, this particular car with these particular kilometres is selling around about this price, and use that information to help consumers either set their price, know whether they're buying at a good price, help dealers work backwards from that price for when they're sourcing inventory, you know, is a great example of where that data that just happens on a daily basis can add value back. Another one is, you know, car companies spend millions of dollars working out what their competitive set is. So, you know, if I know what cars my car competes with, I'll know what price to put it at in the market, what features and options it should have. And, you know, it's a subjective determination that says this car is a competitive car to this one. We know what's a competitive car to this one because we can say, well, people who inquired on this also inquired on this and this and this. And we've put a lot of time and effort into adding value back to our process. Our display business is a substantially growing part of the business. It's the fastest growing part of the business. But we don't go in and say, you should buy some banners and some islands and some skyscrapers and this is how much it costs you. We go in and say, let's look at what this particular model's been doing prior to the campaign, and let's show you what influence it has on consumer behaviour. And you think about the shift to mobile, we can't fit as many ads on a mobile screen, so it has to be about how do we measure influence, and use of data is a key to that. that process.
I think the collection of data is important, but at the scale at which we're collecting data now, it's more the interpretation and then the relevance of the data that's the critical thing. We really look forward to a mobile world because you look at your phones every day, so the ability to commercialise that is really high. But we've already got products in the marketplace today that maximise the collection and interpretation of data. So, for example, we can tell a real estate agent their market share relative to their competitors now. We can tell them why they've got more listings than a nearest competitor based on their marketing programs. We can tell them that their average clearance rates are 20% higher or less than their competitors for a reason. If you're a property owner, we can tell you the number of people looking at your ad relative to the competition. You know, if you've got a 4-bedroom house at Baldwin, your competition is similar houses in those geographies. We can tell you how your campaign's performing. So the collection and interpretation just provides complete visibility to people looking for property, buying property, and those brokers that are selling property.
Okay. Oh, that's my little finger on there. You know, if there's one thing I notice in the digital world that these guys are operating in, is that every morning I know how many people read my story and whether I succeeded or failed. And I can usually pick it, but sometimes I can't. And that's the secret of these people. Our 3 people who diverted the rivers of gold understood their customer bases by finding out from them what was going on. And if you can imagine that if you're a conventional company like a News Corp or a Fairfax or a television station or Myer, a whole lot of them, they'd never seen anything like it. And they still haven't in many cases. And that's the world that has to be adapted to. That's the shortage of skills. And what our speakers have been talking about is that they're moving to the next stage now. They can now see that there are new challenges coming to them, and they've seen what happened to Fairfax. They don't want to have it happen to them. And that world that we're looking at now is totally different to the world I grew up in. I'm very privileged to have been part of this new world in the last 6 years, but it is different. And that's the challenge for all of us, because these guys are now leading the world in that sort of, in the preparation of material, and then getting the customer reaction back, and then going again to the next and developing markets. And that's the world we now live in, which will be accelerated by mobile phones. And we've had a rare insight into how our world has changed and how it will change again and again and again. Please give our speakers a great hand. Thank you.
Well done, mate.
Just sorry.